Do lurkers learn? What is a lurker? Lurkers are students who do not actively participate in discussions and other collective activities on the net. They may very well be active learners behind the scenes, reflecting on course contents and on contributions by other students. However, if active participation is used as a measure of learning or even as a criterion for assessment, lurking is a problem for both students and teachers in net-based learning environments. Do lurkers learn? The theorist's view. Witness learning by Fritz 1997 was introduced to interpret positive evaluation results of participants with low or no visible active levels, which led to further studies on the invisible learner in order to better understand invisible activities that remain behind the scene. Fritz, the evaluator for the very first virtual seminar, looked at both the on-screen participation as well as questionnaire data. What struck him most was the discrepancy between measurable and visual participation, and the self-reporting of many of the participants that they were active, only they did not say anything. In other words, many of the participants reported that they regularly read discussions, but for a variety of reasons choose not to submit a written contribution. It was clear that if one only considered the written contributions, the participation rate appeared to be, at best, only about 50%. Yet it also seemed clear that many whom we regard as functional dropouts were not. At the end of the seminar, these non-contributors reported that they had learned considerably from the seminar. Fritz coined the term witness learning to indicate that these passive participants were in fact active learners, and that they reported to have learned from witnessing the interactions among the active participants. Hollenberg 2001 also agrees with the notion of witness learners. He argues that learning, even in this more passive mode, is still occurring. However, Benath and Rubin 1999 stated that learning should consist of mediated two-way interaction. Certain course format requires some online participation to successfully complete criteria, so lurkers will fail on this aspect. However, the perception that there are avenues for interaction is just as important as actually utilising them. Fulford and Zhang 1993 found that a key factor in student satisfaction in an interactive course was not the extent to which students actively participated, but rather their perception that interaction was occurring. A recent study involving Kate Orton-Johnson from Edinburgh University, where she participated in many discussions as a lurker, showed that either as a result of a lack of time in which to get involved in discussions, a lack of interest in the subject area, or a lack of knowledge and information about the topic was key. Lurking allowed her to keep track of the strands of debating occurring following discussions on topic areas which interested her or that she knew little about, and sustained a level of involvement with what was going on in the conferences, increasing her levels of participation if necessary, rather than losing track of the content of the postings and the type of interaction going on in the conferences. Lurking functioned as a quick and easy way to manage and sustain an invisible presence in the various forms. However, the quality of postings in the forums also mean that even as a lurker, the investment of time required to maintain this presence was substantial. Gonzalez 1995, an insightful study of online course interaction, observed that teachers adopted a much more formal tone when communicating electronically with students, compared to her communication with students enrolled in a classroom-based version of the same course. That 3/4 of the respondents in this preliminary study indicated they prefer to read rather than write, may suggest a learning style preference. Students' view. Vanessa Dunman asked students in Florida to participate in an online study who were interviewed stated that the overwhelming most popular reason for student participation on discussion boards were because it required by the teacher to see that they had contributed. About half of the students shared that they participated because they wanted to share an opinion or let a classmate know that they were in agreement. About 1/5 of the students indicated that they posted because they felt they had a articulate process would help them working through ideas. When the same students were asked who they spent time lurking prior to posting, the most popular responses were to find an appropriate message for responding, to find a model to follow, to avoid making a redundant response, and to learn about the topic. Common reasons for returning to the discussion board to read messages after completing the week's required postings were to see if anyone had replied to their messages or to revisit an earlier idea. No students returned specifically for assistance in preparation for another class assignment. Students who posted messages solely to meet course requirements and who did not read more than the bare minimum required to post were unlikely to feel like the discussion was a meaningful learning activity. However, students who engaged in non-posting participation, such as reading messages to find a model and a point of entry into the conversation and returning to view ideas raised in earlier discussions, tended to also indicate that the discussion actively was worthwhile. This finding demonstrates that lurking is not, as sometimes implied, an activity of the uninvolved or disengaged. Instead, in this class setting, it is more of a temporary phase that fulfills particular students' pedagogical needs. It was interesting to note that in their everyday lives, the students reported engaging in reading behaviours more frequently than posting behaviours, but there are no indications that they had ever been taught productive ways of participating and interacting in a course discussion. All but one of the 24 respondents indicated that they were often processing ideas gained from the course, even when not visibly participating. 19 said they felt they were learning just as much or more from reading others' comments than writing their own. About half identified themselves as autonomous learners, less inclined to be active in group learning, regardless of the medium. 1/3 indicated they'd gained more from other course activities, such as reading, than they did from the online conference discussions. Summing up respondents' comments, the factor cited most often is that online learning is a new experience and students need time to become acclimatised to using it. 3 stated that limited time was a problem, and 3 admitted that their limited interaction online is similar to how they would behave in a classroom setting. Several expressed willingness to write comments more frequently, but did not because by the time they were ready to do so, others had already posted similar ideas. Some said they preferred to read rather than write, and felt just as much learning took place in this manner. 4 students admitted to being self-conscious about writing in this forum. It was also clear that many were reluctant to offer online comments just for the sake of being present. Interestingly, 2 stated that they were frequently composed messages but did not want to post them. Such behaviour may be a more common phenomenon than we might have initially conjured. Indeed, it could be argued that the overactive online students, an example, those who are constantly inputting words, do so at the expense of a more reflective and less visible learning process in which their silent peers are actually more fully engaged. There may exist, of course, other variables that could influence these students' interactive behaviour online. This study did not, for example, record whether or not this was the respondents' first online course experience, arguably a factor that could influence students' communication and one that could change or remain constant over time. Is frequency and interaction a useful measure of student success or ineffectiveness? Is interaction a greater value for some learners than others? Does interaction affect achievement of learning outcomes and grades? What is your opinion? Do Lurkers learn? You decide.